Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Power Rangers episodes. So, this, of course, is to be when good Rangers go bad. So, we are covering Power Rangers episode 17, The Missing Bone. And so, we have Kira that walks into a museum and walks out a little bit more possessed, a little bit more having things not be quite under her control, as she is to be persuaded by Facilidor to retrieve this missing bone that he desperately needs to resurrect himself, so that way he can go on and fight against both Connor and Ethan in their incomplete Megazord, hoping that Kira will come back to them to finish and complete the Megazord to try and fight off this threat. In episode 17, we got some really interesting things going on with Trent also and Mesagog and also Mercer. And so we really go on and just kind of have some interesting story here. Obviously, this episode is going to be great. I liked it. How we have Kira, who is consistently playing this other version of herself, is kind of really fun. And so I of course am also going to be covering some Power Rangers Mystic Force episodes. So I think I do go on to remember that I had covered the pilot episode of this in one video where I kind of talked about a bunch of different Power Rangers seasons. And so for Mystic Force, I thought it was always some wizard, Harry Potter kind of thing. Come to find out, when I went into episodes 8 and 9, I'm like, okay, so it doesn't seem quite like that. And so I'm like, good. It seems like they go somewhere interesting with this show. I would honestly like to watch the best of episodes of Mystic Force, if there is such a thing, to really just kind of see where the season goes, and to get a real inkling of whether or not that I'm gonna really like the show and want to commit to Mystic Force at some point and cover more things. So for the Power Rangers Mystic Force episodes, we have Stranger Within being the two-parting title for these episodes. And so, come to find out, we have these episodes being carried by Vita, who ends up going into this DJ Fly event, and she ends up coming out of it a vampire. And so we have the Rangers at some point realizing that there is a monster called Flytrap that the Rangers are naturally assuming that all they need to do is destroy the Flytrap and Vita will go back to normal. But come to find out, instead, we will realize that there is much more going on here, that there is to be a lot more tied to Necroli, and the whole second part really ties with that character, and also is to shift some certain characters into going on and being involved with Necroli. So, in all honesty, I didn't really like the Power Rangers Mystic Force theme song. After just watching it for 2 episodes, I'm like, man, that theme song freaking sucks. I hate it. It's just it already feels like if you were to have gone on and had a 5-second thing on a loop for 20 minutes, Like after a while, it's like it's funny. Like it's like, oh yeah, it's kind of. But then like the further and further you go along in the song, it's just like, man, like okay, like you didn't have any other lyrics besides that. You didn't have any other thing to add into this song. Okay, all right. You just, I guess, just for Mystic Force, they just gave up for theme songs. There's only so many times that you could have like the Mighty Morphin Power Ranger song kind of sifted into one of the theme songs. But I think there might even be worse Power Rangers theme songs. But man, Mystic Force gets up there. But I did really like a lot of the Zord work in these episodes. I liked the Titan Zords. Those things were pretty freaking sweet. I was like, wow, that's got to be the coolest thing. Also, I liked the big, massive guy who was Korg, because he was always like, yeah, I want to fight honorably. So, like, even if it was like 98% like honorable fight, he was like, well, there's still that 2%. And then he would just walk off. It's like, wait a minute, what? Dude, like, take down the Power Rangers. No, it's not honorable. I'm like, okay, Korg, you're probably going to end up with the Power Rangers at some point because you just keep talking about honorable fights. And I'm sure the villains are just going to be like, honorable fighting is not what we do, buddy. Like, have you seen any of the other past seasons of Power Rangers where, like, all the Rangers villains would state, it's like, well, yeah, like, we're always going to beat the Power Rangers because we don't fight fair. And so, like, Korg, you're making a big mistake there, buddy. You're on the wrong side, obviously. You're going to join the good side at some point, I know. But still. Anyways, I think it's about that time to just go into spoilers. I kind of teed up these episodes. And so, yeah, so for Mystic Force, I would want to just see like the best of episodes that Mystic Force has to offer, or if they kind of have like a lot more supernatural themed kind of episodes. Like I would be interested in just kind of checking out some more Mystic Force. But who knows? If it seems that people are interested in Mystic Force and know something about it, then I would be happy to go into it. But I also just kind of want to play the field and just kind of see like what Ranger season it seems people seem to be interested in. Yeah. So with that said, let's go into the double 5 time territory, because it's about that time yet again to of course go into spoiler time. Spoiler time is about that time. I'm going to spoil these episodes. I feel like the only thing that I'm a little bit worried about is the Mystic Force episodes. So I feel like I'm going to just drop out at a moment where I'm like, I don't know where to go from here. Because I don't feel like I know the Mystic Force stuff as well as I know the Dino Thunder stuff. That's where I kind of feel that I'm just kind of like, ugh. But other than that, I think it's about that time to just go into this. So let's go into it. So in the very beginning of the Dino Thunder episode 17 episode, Missing Bone, a bone on your own. So a big old, a big whiffy stiffy bone. Anyways, so we go into the beginning of episode 17 with Ethan, Connor, and Kira all going into Reefside High, and we have them drawing some conclusions of whether or not, like, Trent is to really be as bad as they think that he is. And we had Ethan who's telling this story about him going on and trying to steal somebody's lunch money. And we have the rest of the Rangers that really can't believe that story, because it's like, well, like, Trent is a rich guy. Like, didn't you see that other episode where he's, like, commissioned and he's working with Carson to do a comic book? I don't think that this guy's going to be hurting for money anytime soon. And he can kind of do his job whenever he can go on and do it. But still. So, but yeah, so they go on and they're like, well, yeah, like they're wanting to like just figure out like Connor. Um, they're wanting to try to figure out Trent, and so we have them just walk into this class. So Trent has overheard what they had stated because he, of course, is in camouflage. So Trent is like, all right, like, okay, like, it seems like they're talking smack about me. Okay, all right. Like, when the next time I fight him, it won't be in this episode, but the next time I fight him, like, I'm going to give him what for. So we have Trent going on to meet with Principal Randall, and she, of course, is talking to Trent and stating it's like, well, hey, like, you know what, Trent, I think you should go on and be involved in a team. I think, yeah, I think you should go on and, like, you should belong to something. And so Trent is to say, it's like, well, I was to be given an offer from one team, and Principal Randall's like, oh, and Trent says he's like, yeah, like, and I didn't want to be involved with losers. And Principal Randall's like, oh, yeah, when you think about it, the villain side of things, they're freaking losers. They lose all the time. When they go on and they do actually win, they just dance it off and like, yeah, let's have a parade. But they never legitimately win. And once they seemingly do win and they finally beat the Power Rangers, we just turn around and have the Power Rangers get better powers anyways. Or just go on and just bizarrely have the villain side of things just get freaking kicked out of Earth by whoever is new rolling in, whatever new monster is rolling in this month or this week or this whatever. So yeah, so on the villain side, they're really just losers, and when they even do win, we just go on and have them move on uh, to just be forced to be out in space somewhere. So anyways, I had a whole rant about that. I'm sorry. So we have Connor, Ethan, Kira, Devin, Cassidy, and all the other students that are in this class that don't have names. They're going on and they're just kind of playing around. They're just kind of making busy work. And so they're like, okay, like, who's going to go on and replace Dr. O? And so who's going to replace Tommy? Nobody's going to replace Tommy. So we have Principal Randall that comes in. It's like, okay, like, I guess you're all drawing a conclusion of who's going to be your new teacher. And so that new teacher ends up being Anton Mercer. I'm like, in my brain noggin, I'm like, this guy is rich, right? What does he need to do with being a substitute teacher? Doesn't he also own a museum? Doesn't this guy have some money? What is he doing? So, Anton Mercer comes strolling in. It's like, oh, high class. So, we had people like making bets of who would go on and be their teacher. And I think Devin states about like some 80-year-old hag or something. And Kira is to go on and tell Devin, it's like, well, like this guy's looking pretty good for being 80, right? So we have Anton Mercer that states the class that he wants them to all sign permission forms for all of the parents because he's going to bring them to this museum. And so we go on to have Kira, Connor, and Ethan all getting out of class. And so they're all doing busy work as all three of them are all looking on at Anton and Trent kind of arguing at one another. So we have the three Rangers, and they're asking us, like, well, hey, what are you guys doing today? And we have Ethan that states he has computer club. We have Connor that states he has soccer practice. Because I'm assuming for Connor, like, soccer is just year round. Soccer is all the time for Connor. Like, he can go on and just kind of pick it up and kind of find it anywhere. So maybe he has private practice. I don't know. Trying to get better year round. So Kira's estate that she's going on and doing inventory with Tommy Oliver. And so they're like, oh, okay, great. Like, so, like, we're all busy. Like, why did Kira even ask what we were going on and doing? Oh, because she wanted to state what she was gonna do with, like, yeah, I'm gonna be by myself with Tommy. Not the actual Tommy, just a stunt double and Tommy's voiceover that comes later, but still. I'm doing a project with Tommy. So, we have Kira go on to talk to Oliver, Dr. O, and funny enough, I think we had Johnny Young Bosch, who in the Overdrive Once a Ranger episode, he ends up going on to state, it's like I never thought that Tommy would be a doctor. So, we have Kira she's talking to Tommy. So Tommy is to be happy that Anton had gotten the job, and so Kira's like, I don't really like I don't really like Mercer, and so like she doesn't like him as much as she thinks that Justin Timberlake is cute or some goofy thing like that. Some reference. Justin Timberlake was referenced on a Power Rangers episode. Wouldn't that be great if there was a goofy number of other references on a Power Rangers episode or any number of things? Man, like, we should go on and have like the Chucky season 2 thing of Power Rangers. Wouldn't that be funny if they would just reference all of this stuff? Or just have like Easter eggs in the background of every scene of Power Rangers, like all of the other freaking shows out there just does that now, where it's like the Easter egg show. Man. So, speaking of Easter eggs, we're gonna get to an egg a little bit later here. So, we have Kira that ends up picking up this bone, and Tommy's like, oh, I need to go on and put this specific bone into its individual case. And so Kira's like, okay, why? And Tommy's like, well, just because. So, like, Tommy really just, like, gives a hint. It's like, well, if any of the bones of which that Tommy is gonna need for a certain kind of monster later on. Anyways, so we have Kira, Connor, and Ethan that go on to this field trip. So we have Kira that is to go on during this field trip while Mercer is going on and mentioning all of these like dinosaurs, and this is the crustacean period, and this is the T-Rex, and Connor's like, T-Rex, high five. Yeah, I love me some T-Rex. And Ethan's like, well, of course you do. So we have Kira that is to see a Tyrannodrone, and is like, hey, what is that? And so all of a sudden, Kira starts walking, and then and Cassidy is behind her, and Cassidy is like, well, hey, like, what are you doing? And Kira's like, well, I think I need to go to the bathroom. And I think Cassidy's like, well, I think I need to like powder my nose too. And then all of a sudden Mercer is to grab Cassidy. It's like, oh no, you're not. Like, you're coming with me. Come on, let's go. So we have Kira, who is to try to track down what she thought she saw, maybe possibly one of the drones. So she goes into this room to then have the Tyrannodrones that are grabbing her and forcing her to look deep into the Fossilidor bit of bones. And so the Fossilidor is going on and controlling Kira and making her eyes turn white as we have the Fossilidor that it's like, hey, bring me back my bone, bring it back to me. So we all of a sudden have Kira, who is to have come back to meet with both Ethan and Connor, and they're like, hey, Kira, is anything wrong? And Kira's like, oh, no, no, no. So we all of a sudden next have Kira, who seems to be, like, trying to create some distance between her and Connor and Ethan. We have them at the cyber cafe, or the cyberspace, Haley's cyberspace. So we have Kira that is kind of filling with some papers, doing some homework, and so we have Connor and Ethan that come to Kira and is asking her. It's like, well, hey, like, do you have any plans? Because, like, hey, we're wanting to go on and do this, and Kira's like, no, I'm not really interested. So we have Haley that goes on and talks to Kira. It's like, well, hey, like why is it that you're just kind of like distancing yourself from the rest of the Rangers? And Kira's just like, well, like we grow apart. Like, so we have Kira that does have something that she needs to go on and do after all. So Kira then goes on to the Dino lab, like the kind of the opening, the cave part of it. So we have Kira that ends up calling Tommy Oliver, or Tommy. Why can't I just state Tommy? That seems easy to just state. And so we have Kira state that she had seen some Dinozord egg and wants Tommy to go out and look into it because she, of course, is too busy. So Tommy comes flying out of this opening with the Black Dino ATV. So we have Tommy that is looking for this egg and is to go on and call Kira and just be like, well, hey, like, I didn't find this egg, like, and so Kira's like, oh, well, my bad, my mistake. I thought it was an egg. Maybe it was just a rock. I don't know. So we had Kira going on and using her sonic scream, and that breaks the lock that Tommy had put on this case for this bone. And so Kira takes the bone and is to give this back to the Fossilidor. And so we then have the Fossilidor that is to see that it's like, okay, like, my work with you, Kira, is done, so I'm just going to blast you and knock you out, while I'm going to go on and resurrect myself and become this big, massive Zord and destroy all of Reefside. So we go on to have the Dino Thunder Rangers, the rest of them besides Kira, we're all going on together and stating how, like, Kira's been acting weird, and so they all go into the Dino lab and realize that the bone that was in this case is now missing. So We of course have Tommy who's drawing the conclusion. It's like, well, obviously, like if I didn't take it and you guys didn't take it, well, that kind of narrows down uh, like the suspects of who could have taken it. So they're like, oh, okay, well, it obviously has to be Kira who had gone on to take this bone. And so we have Tommy that goes on to explain that this bone was to be the only bone left to have brought back to life Basilador, and like I guess Tommy had uh this dinosaur as well as Anton did, and so we go on to have on the news that Ethan and Connor state that it's like, hey, is that your Facilador? And Tommy's like, well, yeah, I guess it ended up getting resurrected. So we have the Rangers that go on to uh, go into the Dino Thunder Raptors or the Raptors, and they are riding off to then be met by Zeltrex and the Triptopoids. So we have Tommy that goes on to fight Zeltrax and the Triptopoids, while Connor and Ethan are going to uh, become the Thundersaurus Megazord that's incomplete. So we have Tommy that goes on to take down all the Triptopoids. He'd also called on to his Zord to kind of release all the other Zords out. So the Brachiozord, so they can like get all the Zords released. So we have Tommy who takes out all of the Triptopoids and then starts fighting Zeltrax, and we have one moment where Zeltrax ends up smacking against this car, and so that ends up kind of being like the finishing up of Zeltrax realizing like, oh, okay, like, well, I guess I'm defeated. I'm just gonna get out of here, so that way I don't get destroyed. So we go on to, of course, have Connor and Ethan that are to kind of throw everything that they can at the Fossilador, and it's really doing nothing. So the Fossilador is going on, and like even when it gets kind of destroyed a little bit, it just regenerates its bone. It's like, ha ha ha, ha, like you aren't going to beat me so easily. So we have Haley who runs off to the museum because she's like, okay, where is Kira? Like, the Rangers are going to need her. So Haley runs off to the museum, assuming that that's where Kira is. So we have Kira who's trying to open up this museum, and we have the security guard that's like, excuse me, miss, but like the museum is closed. And so Haley goes on to state, it's like, well, like, I think there's one person left in the museum. And the security guard is like, well, I went on and I checked, and I don't think there's anyone here. And so Haley's like, well, do you think that you can go on and check again? And the security guard looks at Haley and smiles, is like, well, I think I can look one more time. So we have Haley and the security guard looking in this museum together, finding Kira, and so Kira ends up coming to. They're like, oh man, I'm hurt. So we then have Kira and Haley that kind of quickly get out of here, as the security guard is asking, well, do you think that she needs a doctor? And we have Haley like saying, it's like, oh no, I think she'll be fine. All I think she needs to do is morph, and then she'll be fine. Because, man, those morphing, like, you get more energy, you probably can get cured from a concussion, all kinds of things. So, we have Kira that joins into the fight with her Terrazord. And so then they can completely become the Thundersaurus Megazord. So we have, of course, them trying to figure out how to attack uh, the Facilidor, and so they're trying to use all these attacks against it, but then Tommy ends up drawing the conclusion that the one latest bone that went into Facilidor more than likely should be the one spot that the Dino Thunder Rangers should attack, because it's probably the most vulnerable because it's the latest edition. So we have them go on to drill into that one place of that bone, and we then figure out that that is the one thing to defeat this Facilidor. And so it's like, all right, like that ended up working out, that ended up like fixing it. So we then end up going on, and I think we end up having the Rangers who end up talking about Anton Mercer, and possibly how like Anton Mercer could have had the Tyrannodrones and could have had uh, that fossil there, and so on and so forth. So, but the next thing we end up really seeing is that we have Anton, who is desperately trying to cure himself of getting rid of Mesagog, and so Anton seems to be close to having this cure. So he has this like little baster, and he kind of takes this bit of liquid, and he's like, "Oh, I'm so close," and he's kind of pouring it into this thing. And that's, of course, when the change between Anton and Mesagog starts happening. And so Mesagog ends up stating, it's like, well, hey, like Anton, like this is like a futile effort, and like I'm gonna go on and take down the Rangers, or I'm gonna kind of take control, whether there are Rangers or there are not Rangers. So yeah, just stating that Mesagog is feeling that he's going to be taking most of the control um, for a very long time. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to just start covering the Mystic Force episodes. So, for Mystic Force, so in the very beginning of this two-part episode, we of course have Power Rangers Mystic Force episodes 8 and 9. So the beginning of episode 8 is to start off with the Rockporium, which is to be this record store, which I'm thinking in my brain, I'm like, well, obviously with COVID, that was like the first thing for that place to go, because I don't think people are still going to go on and buy vinyl records. Like, I also felt that, like, that store was just kind of busy work, because it really just didn't make sense to me. Like, there's so many times you can go through so many Power Rangers seasons and not really justify, like, what the Power Rangers were doing, like, as jobs or, like, stuff to do kind of in between when they're not being Power Rangers. But I guess if one of the Power Rangers owned the business and the rest of the Power... So, like, how are they going to go on and do, like, legit, like, a 9 to 5 when most of the Rangers have to go on and fight whoever? Like, who's going to be manning the store? Anyways, that's just how my brain just somehow works. So, we have the Rockporium, and so we have Lily that is desperately, or Lee, that wants to go on and date Nick, the Red Mystic Ranger. So she is to state, is like, well, hey, like, I want you to take me to this DJ Fly event. And Xander is like, well, hey, like, maybe you should give up on Nick, and like, maybe you should go on and you should have me, like, go on a date with you. And Nick states is like, well, hey, like, I'm already busy, and Xander, you're already busy because, like, we're gonna go on and be doing the same thing. So we all of a sudden have Vida that is to look at this flyer and is to see that there is to be this DJ uh, this DJ Fly event. So Vida's like, oh, okay, like maybe I can just kind of sneak away and maybe I can go on and go to this event. So we have Vida and Lee that both go to this event together, and we all of a sudden have Lee that is getting a call from her mother, and so Lee has to leave the event. So we find Vida that is starting to get like mesmerized by this DJ, and come to find out the DJ ends up turning into a monster called Flytrap. So we have back at the root core, we have all the rest of the Rangers that are just kind of there, and they're trying to figure out like what they need to study, like what books that they need to learn. And so they're also kind of waiting on Vida to show up. So Vida ends up coming to meet up with the Rangers, and so they're like, well, hey, like, where have you been? And Vida's like, oh, like, well, I don't think I made too bad of timing. And they're like, Vida, you slept for like a day and a half. Like, you've been gone for a while. Like, where have you been? And Vida's like, oh, not realizing how long she, I guess, had slept for. Because whenever Vida is leaving and then she comes back, she like sleeps for like a day and then comes back to the Rangers, and they're like, oh, okay, hey, you're still here. All right. So we all of a sudden have Nick, who is getting a mental transition from Corgan, wanting to fight with the Power Rangers. So we have the Power Rangers that end up going off to meet with Corgan, and Corgan goes on to have, and I'm not quite sure what exact minions that they have for Mystic Force. I think it's the steroids. I think it's what they're called. So we all of a sudden have all the steroids there, and so Vida is going on and like kind of telling all the Rangers, is like, well, you know what, how about you guys just kind of pull back? Like, I think I'm just gonna go on and take on all of these guys. And so Vida just starts beating the crap out of all these minions. She goes on and she's like starting to really just like fling them and chuck them and whatever. And so we have all the Rangers that are like, oh my god, I've never seen like V do something like this. Like, this is crazy. This is off the hook. So they're all very pleased with V's performance, and we of course have Melanie, or no wait, Madison, my bad. Melody is the real character's name. Madison goes on as like, wow, like you're doing great, sis. So we have all of the minions who are now like done with, and so now Corgan is to go on and become big, and so now we have the Rangers who go into their Titan Megazords. So we have the red who has the Mystic Phoenix, the yellow that has the Mystic Garada. We have blue who has the Mystic Mermaid, pink who has the Mystic Sprite, and green that has the Mystic Minotaur. Which again, like these Titan Zords look really cool. So we have the Titan Zords that try to fight off Korrigan, and so they end up doing a pretty good job. It seems like they even like mega zorded up and everything seems to be going well. But then all of a sudden, like, dawn hits. And we then find out, even after Korrigan is to get into his Zord, which is the Centaurus Wolf Megazord. The problem of it is that we have Vita that bails out of not only the Megazord, but then her own Zord, and then is to fall to the ground, demorph, because of the sunlight that hits her. And so now Vita is very sensitive to light. So now Korrigan had left because it's like, well, like, this is not an honorable fight because you're one less, so like you're 90%, maybe less than that. So Korrigan leaves. He's like, well, this is an honorable fight, goodbye. So we then go back to the Rockporium, and we end up having Vita that is talking to the Rangers, and the Rangers end up asking Vita, it's like, well, hey, like, are you okay? And she's like, no, I'm fine. Like, I think I just needed to rest. And so we all of a sudden have Chip, who is drawing some conclusions because Vita states that she is sensitive to sunlight and she sleeps during the day. And so Chip all of a sudden is grabbing this book and reading it of like signs of being a vampire. And Chip is like, aha, like, I think that she's a vampire. And so we all of a sudden have Vita, who puts down her sunglasses and is to have her eyes be red and her teeth turn into vampire teeth. And she's like, ah. So we start to see that Vita, of course, is becoming a possible vampire. So we go on to, in the very beginning of the next episode, because I'm not quite sure if that ends the whole first episode or not, but it's pretty close there. So in the beginning of the next episode, we have Mordecon that is to talk to Korrigan. So Mordecon is starting to get a little upset with Korrigan with all of his honorable talk stuff, to the point of giving points to Necroli for, it's like, well, hey, like if she didn't have the monster that she had, like, you would go on and whoa. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I'm getting way ahead of myself. So, because we have to go on and we have to, in the first episode, we have to go on and also get rid of Flytrap. I completely spaced out about that. So yeah, I'm getting way ahead of myself. So we, so I think I'm missing like a good uh, chunk here. So since now Chip had drawn the conclusion that Vita could be a vampire, this is back after like Chip is to read the book and is to look at the signs, and so we have Vita that comes back and she continues to do this kind of pose. So we have Chip who goes on and gives Vita this drink, and she takes the drink and then she spits it out. And so Chip is even more like, oh, like you only drank this drink because it looked like blood. And Vita's like, no. So Chip is to immediately draw the conclusion that Vita is a vampire and that he is to be a part of Count V, which is this whole organization that deals with vampires and other kind of assortment of things. So we have the Rangers that are like, no, like there's no way that Vita is a vampire. That doesn't make sense. Like I don't think vampires are real, and so on and so forth. Everybody's trying to like just think that Chip is not stating anything of real whatever. Anyways, so we have Chip that ends up going on with Vita to go to the place of which where she was to become a vampire. So Chip goes with her to this DJ Fly event. So we all of a sudden have Chip kind of rocking back and forth, kind of like Vita does. And so we have Necroli that is very impressed that Vita had gone on and brought another ranger to her. And so we have DJ Fly that ends up turning into Fly Trap. And so we then go on to have Flytrap that starts to connect to all these people that are already vampires. And so we get all of the group of these people that are all lumped outside together, and they're just in these this pack of vampires together. And so we then have Chip that goes on to tell Necroli that he's not he's not under her control, or he's not going to be a vampire, because of course he was to go on and put these kind of earplugs in his ear. So kind of like how in Batman and Robin, we had Robin that goes on and has the rubber lips thing. Same kind of thing here. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of clever planning. So we then have the Yellow Ranger morph, and so he goes on to try and fight off Necroli. And it seems that at one point we have Flytrap that is almost to go on and attack Vita, and so Chip jumps and gets in the way of that attack, and so Chip demorphs, and so then like the whole place just kind of empties. So Vita goes on and talks to Chip, and it's like, well, hey, like you should not have gone on and protecting me like that, because it ended up just hurting you instead. I'm like, man, also it just seems kind of flimsy how a lot of Power Rangers would like morph and then demorph. Like a lot of times I would go on it and see like in these two episodes that the Power Rangers would just be falling and all of a sudden in mid-fall they would morph, and I'm just like, huh? I'm like, that doesn't quite make any sense. Um, but also it just kind of seems very flimsy that for any kind of like one hit thing, all of a sudden the Power Ranger would just demorph. I'm like, what if that just happens all the time? What if a putty just kind of like just socks you in the face and you're just gonna demorph then? It seems kind of flimsy when Power Rangers are just demorphing everywhere. Hence why they go on and they morph just like in the middle of public anywhere, because half the time they get a strong enough attack and they demorph and then anyone can see who they are. So, but Chip and Vita, Chip is going on and telling Vita about this story about how he would go on and he would wear this superhero costume. And Vita's like, hey, like, you wore that every day and you even wore it to the prom. And Chip is like, well, yeah, but I looked really good in that, didn't I? And so Chip has this whole story about him wearing this superhero costume, and Vita had gone on to stick up to Chip, who everyone else would kind of give him crap about this superhero costume. So, kind of making us realize that both Vita and Chip, like their relationship is very strong with one another. Okay, because we really have to like show that through 2 episodes. So now we would of course go on to have the Power Rangers needing to I'm trying so perfectly to figure out the let me pause for a second. Alright. We also had the moment where Chip and Vita were kind of together on like on this chair or this kind of the seat thing, this bench, and we had Chip and Vita talking to one another, and the whole entire time Vita was trying to bite at Chip, and Chip consistently had this garlic on a stick thing that he kept waving in front of Vita. And so we had even Chip that wanted to probably get 2 different like garlic on a stick things, or garlic on a like a candlestick, so he can kind of fend off Vita. And so they end up talking about like if they're gonna be able to figure out how to help Vita, and they end up just kind of talking. So like that ends up happening, of course, because Chips is the only one that really knows the truth. So we go on to have all the Rangers that come together and need to fight off the fly trap. So after we have the weapons and the tornado attacks, we then go on to have the fly trap that ends up growing bigger, and so the Power Rangers end up turning the Titan Zords into the Titan Megazord. I state that probably more than likely all the Titan Zords are by themselves Megazords, but still it's a bit of just word confusion. So I want to just call the Titan Zords because they evolve into a Megazord. So, like, why call everything just, hey, this is Titan Megazord, but there's also Titan Megazord? The thing where all the Zords combined, it's just, it doesn't really seem like there's 2 different names for these things. So, we, of course, end up having the Ancient Power Mystic Spell Seal that goes on to destroy the fly trap, and they have to go on and do this last attack quickly because they realize that the sun is coming up. So they go on and they defeat the flytrap, and so all of the people, it seems, is to be cured from their vampirism. And so we then go back to the Rockporium, and we think that everything is okay. So the Power Rangers end up getting convinced that Chip was right all along about V being a vampire, and we have them getting convinced by Udana, where it's like, well, hey, like, there are several different kinds of monsters and beasts that we just aren't aware of, Rangers. So, like, maybe at some point, like, maybe we should believe Chip, because yeah. So it's a whole thing of that, a whole thing about that. So Udana does come back into the fold uh, to kind of convince the Rangers that maybe Chip was right. So at the end of this episode, we have us go back to the Rockporium, and we have Chip with this whole like set of all these supernatural things just in case, because he's with the Count V. And so we, of course, have Chip that's convincing Nick to also be a member of Count V so he can get all this stuff. So we even have at one point the Chip that is to have this vampire chalk, and Nick's like, well, what's the vampire chalk? So Chip starts drawing a circle around V, and it's like, well, hey, like, if V is still a vampire, like, she's gonna not be able to walk past this circle. And it's kind of like you going on and putting salt around a monster or whatever, and then they can't get out of the salt circle, or you going into the salt circle and trying to, like, not get attacked by some monster. It kind of works that way. So, for supernatural things. So, when V starts to walk out of the circle, because Xander is to have stated that, like, well, hey, like, they need to know about something on the phone. So V starts walking out of the circle and realizes that she smacks into some kind of shield that is forcing her inside the circle. So they're like, oh my god, so V is still a vampire. So that is what ends the 8th episode, and we have V that goes on to like, hey, like, she's showing her teeth, and like Lee's watching on, is like, oh my god, my friend is a vampire. So we go into the next episode, and so that's when we have Mordecon that is talking to Corrigan and giving him crap, because it's like, well, hey, like, Necroli is doing a better job than you are, and like, it's all about like who's doing the better job. So we go on and have the Rangers, who are keeping V in this circle, but now the circle is now bizarrely in the root core, which is to, of course, be their like technical command center. So we have supposedly like Claire, who's going to need to watch over V and like make sure she doesn't go on and like get out of the circle. So Claire goes on. It's like, oh, okay, like I'll watch over her. So we of course, need the Rangers to figure out how they can help V, and so they realize that they need to go on, and they need to uh, read the book that, of course, is the Xenotome, and make a Dawn Crystal. And so I'm kind of all over the place with this one. I'm trying to figure out where exactly this episode goes, and I know I'm gonna not state this correctly, so I apologize. We have Udana because Chips say that the ingredients for the Dawn Crystal is very difficult to make, and Udana is like, well, hey, like I have all the ingredients right here because I knew that you guys would need it, and so Chip go on and use their sorcery-like power to be able to make this Dawn Crystal so you can go on and fight Necroli to uh, to be able to use this Dawn Crystal against her, because that's the plan. So we also, the reason why the Rangers were gone was because they had suspicions in the early part of the episode, which I'm going to cover now. We had suspicions, if it wasn't Flytrap, that it was Corrigan. So Nick goes on to try and figure out how he can connect to Corrigan through his mind, and the Power Rangers end up meeting up with Corrigan, but it ends up being Chip, the Yellow Ranger, that goes on and tries to fight Corrigan first, and then the rest of the Rangers start coming. So we have Chip that goes on and starts fighting Corrigan, and we have it first that like Corrigan's like, well, hey, I'm not gonna fight you, you're not strong enough. But then all of a sudden we find out that Chip has this new spell, and then Corrigan's like, oh, wait a minute, alright, like you've impressed me. Okay then. So let's battle. So they end up going on to figure out from Corrigan, it's like, well, hey, like, were you the one who had gone on and made V a vampire still? And Corrigan's like, no. If anything, you would need to go on to look to Necroli for that. So we then, by the time we have the Rangers go on and realize that Necroli is like a vampire queen, and that seems to be very like unstoppable. And so we have the Rangers that make it back to the root core, and they realize that 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 Claire is in the circle that V should be, and so they're like, oh my god, like, Claire is so dumb, like, she's obviously made this mistake to let V out, and so Claire is a state that it's like, well, hey, like, V, like, put me in the circle, and so can you guys get me out? So we had Xander that goes on and kind of scrapes off the circle, and Claire walks off, and then we then see Claire again, who's like, well, hey, like, V was trying to trick me to let her go, but like I told her no, and so like, oh my god, like, that must have been V, and like, she just became Claire to try and like get her way out of this. So we had the Rangers trying to go on and figure out through the uh, the Zenatome and all about the Dawn Crystal, while that was going on, we had Vita that goes to Necroli, and Necroli ends up going and giving V a sack full of apples and is tell her like, hey, take these to the Rangers and like you'll fulfill what I need you to do. So we have Vita after the Rangers are trying to look for V. They end up using these mystic racers to try and find where V could possibly be, and Chip is going on to make the Dawn Crystal and ends up putting it together. We, after the Rangers are just kind of looking for V ends up coming right back to them, and so V ends up stating like, yeah, I'm completely fine, like I was to walk out in the daylight and I'm fine, guys, like I took out Necroli myself, all by myself, I just took her out. So we have V that is giving all the Rangers these apples, and we start to have Chip realize that this is a very unusual gift. And so we have V that is to grab this apple. It's like, no, it's okay, guys. Hey, everybody, your apples, come on. And so Chip is like, no, don't eat the apples. There's something wrong with V. Like, she's obviously not herself. Because when Chip goes on and does the goofy V pose that V does, V didn't even recognize the pose. So he's like, yeah, there's something suspicious here. So Chip is to like smack the apples out of the people's mouths and the hands. Is like, no, don't eat these apples. And so all of a sudden they find when the apples fall to the ground that the apples turn black and they like smush onto the ground. And they're like, yeah, like there must have been something wrong with that after all. So V runs off, realizing that they've kind of figured out that like she's a villain. So we possibly have Udana that is to think it's like, well, hey, Rangers, like we could possibly lose V forever, and this might be that case. So because she's really turning evil. So we go on to have the Rangers that are making their way to face off against Necroli because they have the Dawn Crystal. So we have the Pink Ranger that is to be used as this kind of like bulletproof vest for Necroli against the Dawn Crystal. So we have Chip that needs to go on and is to think about what V had said. When V had said it's like, well, hey, like, you should go on and, like, protect the many instead of the few. So, really just stating it's like, well, hey, like, at some point, you're going to have to go on and risk V's life so that way you can do the better task, the better job. So we also had the rest of the Rangers all trying to face off against the Pink Ranger, and like we even had the Red Ranger that was like grabbing on to V and trying to convince her like, hey, like stop doing this, and Pink Ranger is to go on to fight all the Rangers off, and then she ends meeting with Necroli and is to protect her. So Chip ends up finally convincing V to like, well, hey, like, come on, like stop doing this. And so we finally have V that is to finally like realize like, oh my god, like I've been like, where am I? And so V starts to get control, and so when Chip ends up getting kind of knocked back, when V seems to be a villain again, we have Chip that has his crossbow, and we then have V that is to talk to Chip, but she ends up doing the V pose, and we have Chip who realizes, oh my god, that was a signal. So we have Chip that goes on to fire the Dawn Crystal, hoping that V is going to move. And surefire enough, we had like Xander, and we of course had Nick, and we had Madison that are saying like, "Hey, don't do it! No, like come on!" So Chip fires it, and V moves out of the way, and Necroli gets hit with this thing, and we're thinking like, wait a minute, so is Necroli dead? Like that would make us any sense because she's like a big villain for this story. So we we go on to have the Rangers like realize that that was the one thing to get V back on their side. V is seemingly now fine. So we have the characters going back to the Rockporium, and so now V has to go on and tell Lee that, hey Lee, like yeah, like just so you know, like I'm not really a vampire. If anything, like I was just playing with my friends. And Lee was like, oh okay, yeah, I kind of figured that. Isn't that nice? So we go on to have Lee that leaves to make her way to this place where then she starts fighting with Necroli. And it seems like Lee is doing a pretty good job at kind of just fighting off Necroli. And come to find out, Necroli and Lee are related. And so we realized that Necroli was just testing Lee because it's like, well, hey, you're getting a little rusty because you're not practicing as often because you're just messing around with these Rangers. And so we now kind of get why Lee had tried to sucker the Rangers into doing what they were having her do because she's a villain. So it's like, okay, so like we had Lee kind of working, like really working on all these Rangers without having us really know. So is there not a like a Bulk and Skull goofy comedy duo for Mystic Force? Or do we have to just assume that that's probably just Claire? Like, she's probably the comedy side? Like, I don't know. I think, besides actually having Bulk and Skull literally in the seasons, which I think were, like, great, I think, honestly, for any Power Rangers season, if they introduce any Bulk and Skull kind of duo team goofy thing, like, I honestly think that should not be a thing anymore. Like, I think that they should just go on and just get past that and just try other things to do comedy, but not with like a Bulk and Skull kind of thing anymore, unless you have literally Bulk and Skull there and then have them do what they do normally. But I think that that element is just like something that they no longer like. They don't really need like a goofy thing of this show anymore. unless it's kind of like a fourth wall breaking kind of character, which I think that's really what we need for Power Rangers, is to just kind of like make more fun of Power Rangers, kind of make fun of it. And but let me know in the comments below if you think that that's wrong. Like maybe people like the comedy dynamic, or people like the goofy stuff, and maybe I'm just like, no, I like dark and edgy stories, and I'm not getting that. Just because, like, I of course want everything to be serious, and I want everything to matter, and like I don't want to have certain parts of the show that feels just like a throwaway. But anyways, I'm going to get out of here because I realize that this is an hour and 15 minutes. I apologize for how long this is, but I was trying to remember the last bit of the episode, and so that's what kind of like derailed me a lot. So with that said, goodbye everybody. Goodbye everybody.